This video will walk you through creating different geometric shapes on your focal point and then in the background as well. So to do this, I'm going to start with the lasso tool at the top. I'm going to add a new layer to draw my shapes on. So remember, new layers are great so you can keep your background image and your new layer separate. In case you mess up, you can delete, erase, and go back and forth with things. But with that lasso tool, I'm going to outline a shape that I want to fill in. So if you're working with a face, it might be interesting to try to outline around the different directional lines in the image. So around the eye or around the cheek, add some different lines in specific areas. Then I'm going to use the paint bucket tool, select a color, so double click on that square, choose a color, hit OK, and then fill that shape in. And to deselect it or get rid of that selection tool with the lasso there, I'm going to hit Command D, and that will deselect it so I can grab the lasso tool again and add another shape. So this could be something to play around with, creating different types of shapes. There's a lot you can do with the lasso tool. The shortcut for the paint bucket, by the way, is G. So if you hit G on your keyboard, it will bring up the paint bucket for you. If you have the gradient tool up though, G will still bring up the gradient tool too. So click and hold that gradient tool to grab your paint bucket. Then I'm going to grab the lasso tool again and just draw a few other shapes. So this could be something where you're drawing extravagant and detailed shapes, or you could be doing maybe some more generalized or bigger shapes on the face or in different parts of your image. So I'm filling that in. And then a few things you can do once you have shapes added onto your face. If you double click on your layer, there's a bunch of different effects and different settings for those that you can play around with. So one would be stroke, so that's adding a outline around your shapes, and you can adjust the size of the stroke so it's not as thick. You can play around with the opacity of the stroke and your shapes as well. And then the other one that I want to mention is drop shadow. So if you click on drop shadow, so don't just check the box, but click on the word drop shadow, you can add a shadow to your shapes. So you can adjust the opacity, the distance away from the shape. So now it's starting to show up on the image over here. You can change the angle. So if you want maybe the drop shadow to be below or more off to the side, spread will blend it a little bit more with the face. So again, play around with some of those settings as well with your shapes and with drop shadows and outlines. And play around with some of these other effects as well. There could be some that create interesting effects for your shapes. You have shapes how you want them on your face. A couple different things you could play around with. You can lower the opacity, so again it's somewhat see-through. You can play around with the blending modes, so the way that these shapes are mixing in with your picture. Each of them will give a slightly different effect, so this could be interesting. Again, if it's maybe something in the background or if you want these shapes to be more of just a texture. You could also consider going back in with the paintbrush and adding some different effects onto the face with the paintbrush. So maybe I'm connecting some of these lines here. Since it's on the same layer, it's using the stroke, it's using those same effects that I had before on this layer, so the drop shadow's on there still. So if you did not want that to apply, if you go back in with lines or if you're drawing something, I would from there add a new layer. So again, you could maybe play around with creating some different designs. So for this practice image that you're working on, I would recommend going through and adding shapes to the entire face. So try to fill all of this up with an interesting design. This would be used for more of a visual effect on your image versus symbolism. However, you could still use this sort of idea with different symbols that you're drawing into your face. So a few more things that I want to mention with these shapes. I'm going to hide this layer and add a new one. One thing you can do with the lasso tool and outlining shapes is outline more of the different colors in the face. So either try that with the shapes or try this out for your practice image. But I'm going to outline value changes. So this area here is a little bit darker. And if I hit I on my keyboard, I can grab the eyedropper to select the color behind there. And then G again will bring up the paint bucket. So I'm actually filling that shape in with the color that I grabbed from the actual picture. And then Command D to deselect. I can grab that lasso tool again. So L on your keyboard is the lasso tool. And maybe this time I'll select a bigger area of the face to fill in with color. And then I for the eyedropper, G for the paint bucket, and then Command D to deselect, L for the lasso tool, and then maybe I'm selecting around this darker area, outlining that, and filling that in. So that's something too that you can play around with. So I'm going to pause this, add a little bit more, and then come back and show you blending these in. Just went over and added a bunch more shapes with the lasso tool and the paint bucket. So what I can do now is go to my paintbrush, and if you click and hold that down and go to the mixer brush tool, I can keep this setting to clean brush, uncheck that first one, have the second button there checked off, and I can almost blend these different shapes together. And this could create an interesting effect with your shapes if you want more of like a painting style on your image. There's also the painterly effect video that does something similar, but this is just a different way to go about doing that. And again, this is optional, so you don't have to try this out if you wanted to do more of the geometric shapes, but this is just another direction you can take things. So from here, once all of this is shaded in, what I would do is hide this layer, add a new one on top, and then go in with the paintbrush and actually add some more detail. So I click and hold that down, grab the paintbrush, and then maybe use just a regular black paintbrush. And you can outline more of those areas of detail. So that way, when I bring my color back, or that background that I did, I have some of this detail on top. So if I unhide this, I can start to see the eye, and that'll get added with some of these details. So that's again something that you can play around with trying out, but try one of those two techniques. The last thing that I wanted to show you is this mirror tool here. So I'm going to pause this, and mirror tool is up at the top here. So this little butterfly, I'm going to click on this, and to create some different interesting shapes on your image, you can use really any of these. So play around with some of them. They'll all give you different effects. But this last one, for example, you can create however many segments you want. But as you're using your paintbrush and drawing, it will create interesting shapes for you. So this could be something cool to play around with, as maybe a symbol that you're putting onto the face, or something that you're putting into the background. And then you can grab that paint bucket tool, pick out some colors, and maybe fill in some of these areas. So once you have these filled in, if you hit Command T on your keyboard, you can change the size of your shape. You can copy and paste it. So Command C for copy, Command V for paste. So this could be something interesting to maybe play around with. I can make the size a little bit smaller here. And then maybe paste it one more time and add, if you hit Command T, it will let you move it. But maybe add a lower opacity, change the placement of some, maybe put it in the background. But that's something to play around with for this geometric idea as well.